Hi, this is Victor Kinzer from Indiana University. I am the co-chair in the pre-award subcommittee, and today I'm going to be going through the new interface for proposal budget. We had a demonstration of this at the pre-award meeting at the Kuali Community Workshop, but unfortunately our recording wasn't the best quality. So I'm going to go through this again and hopefully get a better example for people to use and share with their institutions. So the first thing I'm going to talk about, I'm here on the budget section of the proposal document. We haven't yet jumped into the actual budget document. And I'm just going to talk about the functionality that's available here. We have this submit radio box, and this represents the budget that's going to be submitted with this proposal. A lot of users were confused by the final term that we use currently in the system. It doesn't really communicate what it means. It's final, but what does that mean? Whereas if we do submit or for submission, as it says down here, version 2 is selected, then that is the budget that's going to be submitted with the proposal to institutional proposal, to grants.gov, and moving forward into award budget if your institution uses that integration. So now we're going to come over here, and I'm going to talk through some of these actions that are available. You'll have to excuse some of this artifacting over here. These are just mock-ups, and they behave a little bit oddly in a couple locations. We can view summary. And that gives us a very large overview of what the budget looks like without having to dive into the budget and move around and do a lot of page loading. So this should facilitate much faster work for users in a lot of cases. You can export to Excel or a simple PDF designed to just sort of look like this view. We still have to work that document up. We can't demo that just yet, but really the intention is to have something that's very user-friendly that users can just send out to their faculty and then get a nice high overview of what their budget looks like. And then there's print. Unfortunately, this doesn't work right now, but it will bring up the ability to print any of the budget forms that are currently in the system. Some of them are a little more complicated and not as user-friendly as what that summary PDF will be, but they're often necessary. You need that greater detail, especially forms that are specific to certain sponsors. So you won't have to dive into the budget and navigate around to get to those. There's copy. That really works the way copy does now. You put in a new budget name. There's not a whole lot to that particular option. And then we can also mark, you scroll over, submit with proposal. This is the same as using the radio buttons, but provides something that's a little more descriptive and could be useful for certain users. So now I'm going to click Create New. Put in a budget name just like now, and we can choose whether we're going to start a detailed budget or a summary budget. I'm going to say summary just because that will take me to the periods and totals page, and I can go through the whole budget. But if I were to select start a detailed budget, it would take me directly to the screens that are appropriate to detailed budget construction. And then it says, will this be a modular budget? I'm going to go ahead and say no, and that also drives some logic in terms of which screens it takes you to automatically. But this question will only be presented to individuals who are submitting appropriate proposals. So NIH proposals that are linked to system opportunities, which can be modular. So we're going to go ahead and click Create. And then this is going to bring us into periods and totals. You can see that there's just this one line that's available for editing. This isn't necessarily what this will look like when you come and do a new budget. This is meant to be a mock-up so you can see all the functionality that could be on this screen. We are going to allow this line item saving because it lets you send a smaller amount of data to the database, and that will hopefully improve performance a fair bit. But other than that, this is very similar to what is currently in the system. The difference is you'll notice there aren't all the settings up above. We have budget settings right here, and things like total direct cost limit, whether it's on or off campus, our modular budget, submit cost sharing. Those options are in this separate modal window, pop-up window. And that's really meant to sort of minimize the amount of information that the user has to synthesize. It's not just thrown at them. But for a user that needs to change that, it's very quickly accessible. I'm going to go ahead and skip rates. That really looks exactly like the current system. And we're going to move on to personnel costs. So the current personnel costs has a lot of information on it, and it's kind of complicated. You have the ability to add users or add personnel that can be accessed anywhere in the budget, as well as dealing with line items on a period-by-period basis, and it can be very confusing. So we broke personnel costs into two screens. Here we have project personnel, and these are all of the individuals that could appear anywhere on your budget. You can think of them as your personnel portfolio. And it pulls in the individuals from proposal development. This is another change from the current system. We're identifying who's on the proposal development document and who we've added here because that information can be useful to the end user. I'm going to click Add Personnel. We can do an employee search. Because these are mock-ups, I'm just going to hit search. And we can select multiple people. Situations where that might be useful, if you have a small unit, you know you're going to have to add 5 people from your unit. You could just search based on unit, select the 5 people that are going to be involved, and then click Add Selected Personnel. Again, as these are mock-ups, these 3 are sort of hard-coded into this particular example, but it will work with your actual selections in the system. I also want to click on Add Personnel and show another pretty big change to be named. So currently, to be named, you can only add 1 of each type. There are issues with conflicting job codes and having the same salary on multiple, individuals that are identical. But that is often a need. You have multiple researchers to be named. You have multiple data entry assistants to be named. And Coeus accommodates that. So the way this is going to work is I can say I have 4 research associates, 2 computer programmers, and say a project director that I haven't selected yet. I can add to be named personnel to budget, and it will take care of all of that behind the scenes and give me my appropriate lines. Again, that doesn't display here because these are hard-coded, but that's what that interface is going to look like. So now we can go down to assign personnel to periods. And this is where we get into the line items of I've added these individuals, they're putting in this much effort, this much of it is going to be charged. So we can go ahead and click Assign Personnel, and then I can choose an individual and their object code. Let's say they're hourly personnel on campus. I can select a group. It'll put in the automated start and end dates the way it currently does, and I can put in effort and charged, and then I can choose the period type. The nice thing, and this is what's currently in the system, we're hoping to build in something where if you choose academic and you have the appropriate parameters set, it will enter all of the necessary data for them. So if you put them in for a year period and they're academic, it's going to look at their appointment and say, okay, I need, this hunk of academic, this hunk of salary, and then these couple months of academic, or of summer, and then these couple months of academic at the end. That's based on a contribution that's coming in from a contributing school, and we are currently planning on having that in 6.0. So then I can click Assign to Period 1. Again, these are mocks, so you won't see it here, but that's what that interface will look like. One of the big reasons that we have the pop-up as opposed to just an add line is currently in the system you can enter in a bunch of data, you think it's there, it's great, you move to a new tab, and it never gets saved because you didn't actually press the add button. By having everything show up in a pop-up window like that, while it feels a little more involved, you can't skip it. I mean, you can't be sitting on a screen and have it look like just another line item, move to another tab, and have it be forgotten. You have to get rid of that modal. So that's going to get rid of a pretty big pain point for users. So the other thing is, I'm going to try and go to period 2. This is not a good example of the mock-up, but if you try to go to a later period before you've generated all periods, or before you've put data in any of the later periods, it will bring up a warning and say, hey, if you go and add like a single line item to a later period, you won't be able to generate your budget based on period 1. We're trying to guide users through build your period 1, press generate all periods, and let the system work for you. Especially for an early user, it's very easy to not realize that functionality is there. So we're building in some warnings and some additional communication to end users. The other thing I want to talk about is the continue button. And I'm not certain that this is working exactly as intended in the mockups, but we've set up the continue button to be sort of intelligent. So, ideally, if I press continue from personnel costs, it'll take me directly to non-personnel costs. Again, so that part is working currently. And then once I'm done with non-personnel, it would take me down to sub-awards. And then once I'm done there, it would look and see whether or not I have cost share, whether or not I have unrecovered F&A, and automatically direct me to those screens or bypass those screens if I don't need to look at them. And similarly with modular budget, if I'm not marked modular, it'll skip that whole interface for me. So we built in some progressive disclosure and intelligence into the system, and that's how the continue button will work. So here in non-personnel costs, this screen has changed pretty dramatically from the current screen. In the current system, each of these sections, equipment, travel, participant support, etc., have their own add line. It's kind of cumbersome. You don't see it unless you've expanded the panels. So, you have to move around the screen a lot to add line items, which isn't the most user-friendly thing in the world. So here, we've reconciled the personnel and the non-personnel pages to work similarly. I can click on Assign Non-Personnel, choose my category. The object code names will automatically populate based on the category I've selected. Let's say reactor use for $1,000. We're going to do that for 2 using the reactor, and we're going to do it twice, and then click Add Non-Personnel Items. Again, this is a mock-up, so you haven't seen that added here, but you'll always go to the same place to add new line items, and then these sections will populate as you go. It's a much more consistent experience than what we currently have in the system. So then I'm going to look quickly at subawards. This has an example of a subaward added, and you'll note it says upload a pre-formatted budget document for a subawardee organization or enter details manually. So if I click Add Subawardee, I can look up an organization. I don't believe that's working right now, but we all know what the organization lookup looks like. I can upload a PDF, as with the current functionality. I can add comments, and then click Add Subaward. When I bring up the details from here, we have all our attached document information. But if you had not attached a document, you can come down here and add the base information. And this is very similar to the current functionality. So next I'm going to go to institutional commitments. And we have cost sharing. Now, in the current system, this is called distribution and income, which one are two completely separate concepts. The other issue is distribution and income isn't a very intuitive term, whereas institutional commitments really communicates what this is about. We're cost sharing. We are committing to provide this money. We are going to incur unrecovered F&A. We know it's going to cost us, 54, 61, 43% in F&A, but we're not going to charge that whole amount, and we're going to just take that hit. That is an institutional commitment. So we've changed that terminology to be a little more intuitive and a little more reflective of what this actually represents. The other part of that is, we're not going to list our cost share here, in that the cost share is listed in the budget. We're not going to add new cost share. We're just going to assign which part of the institution is covering it. So really, this is very similar. You see the same, individual line item save. I can click Add Cost Sharing to add a line. Once it's added, it's saved there. So if I have a line and I have data typed in it and I leave, it will save. Again, we're avoiding that accidentally entering data and not saving scenario. So otherwise, this is very similar to the current situation. We do have this view summary option because you could have cost share from one period that's broken down between 3 or 4 different departments, and so you don't have a good sense of what's my period 1, what's my period 2. So you can go up here and look at the summary. If we go to unrecovered F&A, that's very similar, some different fields, but still the same general principle. We can click on View Summary. It looks like the summary might not be working on this screen right now, but it works the same way that it does in cost share. If we go to project income, this is very similar. This is almost exactly the same to what we currently have in project income. There's one thing I want to point out. We have these periods, and we're going to have them show the dates in gray. Currently, when you're in cost share or project income and you're using the period display, you don't really know what the date range is. And so we wanted to add that to provide a little more information for the end user. Next, we'll go to modular. If you're entering modular budget information, we have the rates. They can be added. It's very similar. We'll be working by period, or you can go to, an overall period. That may, fortunately, again, is not going to load anything different because these are just mock-ups. We have our direct cost less consortium F&A, and then we calculate is the mechanism that's going to be used to pull in, and we're going to calculate based on our detailed budget. That functionality is the same. Budget notes is very similar to what we currently have. We have a larger area to work with. Currently, budget notes is sort of nestled into a sub-panel. It's not the most user-friendly thing, but we'll have a larger space in the new interface. And then we have our consolidated expense justifications to pull in what we've added to our line items. So the functionality is very similar. Finally, we'll go to budget summary. We've moved this to the end because we really see this as your final review. You want to look at everything you've entered. Does it look right? Great. We have export. This is, the same as we had on that pop-up budget summary, but we have a little more detail here. There's more screen space. You can maximize this, move around in a very large budget. That's very useful. And then if you have, the occasional 10, 15 period budget, you can move between sets of 5 periods and see what's going on. You'll also notice here at the bottom, complete budget is now in blue. So that before the blue button was, I'm just going to use the guided. I'm just going to keep clicking continue and let the system take me to the next screen that I need to go to. Well, once you've gotten here, if I press complete budget, it's going to say, is this budget ready to be sent to the sponsor? Is this done? And again, giving sort of a plain text guided conversation with the user, and I can either click yes, in which case it's going to mark that for submission, it's going to mark it as complete, we're finished, it's going to do all that for me, or I can click no, it leaves me here, and then I can make whatever changes I need to make. When I'm asked that question, I'm prompted to think about it, and I may have realized I've missed something. So before I actually click complete, we have data validation, which I don't believe is mocked up at the moment. It is not, but data validation is going to be the same for all modules and work the same way that it does now. I showed you the budget settings, which I do just want to show one more time. You can also come here and mark complete and incomplete the way you can in the current system. There is that functionality for users that are comfortable with that. And then the summary that I showed you earlier is available here. The nice thing about that, and the reason we have this available in so many different locations, is you're in the middle of your personnel costs, you're working through your personnel costs, and you really want to get a larger view of the budget. The current sort of mini summary that shows up on every page just takes up a lot of space. It isn't that useful, but we couldn't really fit any more information there. If you move to the budget summary page, you have to reload everything. That's problematic. So we made it available in this modal, this pop-up, that, when you're ready, you can just click on this and go to it, and that's great. So that's really why that's available there. And then you can also navigate between all of your budget versions from within the budget document. That's very similar to today. That's available in the system. Although again, the nice thing about having it in this modal is you don't have to navigate off of whatever you're doing to take a quick look and see what your budget versions are. And then auto-calculate periods. Currently in the system, you can calculate periods or you can generate periods. We moved those into a single concept to kind of minimize the number of options that were available to the user that they had to keep track of. If you only have data in period 1 and you press auto-calculate periods, it will ask you, do you want to pull that data forward? You're about to auto-calculate data for each period based on the current period 1. If, however, you have data in all of your periods, it would bring up a different question, and it would just recalculate your rates and do the sorts of things that calculate currently does in the system. And so this combines the generate all periods from period 1 and the calculate once you have data in there, because there's really no point where either of those could be valid. Generally speaking, if you don't have all your data in yet, you don't want to be futzing around with just calculating. You want to be generating the full budget before you start playing with that. So we combine that into a single option. So I'm going to go down here and press complete budget again. And we're going to say yes. And it should bring us back to the proposal. Unfortunately, it's not currently working. Again, as I said, these are mock-ups. But when you press complete budget and you confirm that in the final system, it will bring you back to the proposal. I hope that this was useful for everyone. I'm sorry for the stutters and the little hiccups in the system, but these are just design mocks, but it should give a good sense of what the finished system is going to look like. Thank you very much, and have an excellent day.